The amber light of sunset glimmered on the water's surface, as Lillian Rawlins watched a woman's slender silhouette shaking with sobs at the river's edge, her skirts trailing into the muddy shallows of the Missouri. He had come to water his horse after a long day driving cattle, but found himself frozen in place, hat in hand, witnessing grief so raw it seemed to pierce the very air around her. Montana Territory, 1878. The town of Silver Creek lay 3 miles east, but out here the wilderness reigned, untamed and indifferent to human suffering. Lil, to most who knew him, had been working at the Broken Spoke Ranch for 5 years now. At 27, he was respected among the other hands for his quiet competence and fair dealings. His chestnut gelding nickered softly beside him, tugging at the reins, eager for water. The woman didn't turn at the sound. Her shoulders continued to heave as she wept, one hand pressed against her mouth as if to contain the sobs that escaped anyway. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, cascading down her back in waves. Lil cleared his throat. "Madam, are you all right?" She whirled around, startled, nearly losing her balance at the river's edge. Lil stepped forward instinctively, ready to catch her if she fell. Their eyes met hers, red-rimmed and swimming with tears, his concerned beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "I'm sorry," she stammered, hastily wiping her cheeks. "I didn't realize anyone was here." "No need to apologize," Lil said softly, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "Just worried is all." In the fading light, he could see she was young, perhaps 21 or 22, with a delicate face now blotchy from crying. Her dress, though damp at the hem, was of good quality, not the garb of a farmer's wife or a saloon girl, but something in between. "I should go," she said, gathering her skirts. "Wait," Lil said, surprising himself with his boldness. "Whatever's troubling you, miss, you shouldn't be out here alone, especially with night coming on." She hesitated, glancing back toward town, then down at her muddy skirts, as if only now realizing the state she was in. "You'll catch your death in those wet clothes," he added gently. "And there's wolves been spotted near town lately." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "Perhaps that would solve everything," she whispered. Lil felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. He stepped closer, leading his horse. "Miss, I don't know what burdens you're carrying, but I do know this," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "You'll never weep alone again, not if I can help it." She looked up at him, startled by the unexpected promise from a stranger. "I'm Lillian Rawlins," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Everyone calls me Lil. I work at the Broken Spoke Ranch." "Willow," she replied after a moment. "Willow Palmer. Miss Palmer," he acknowledged. "May I escort you back to town, or wherever you're staying?" Willow glanced down at her mudded dress again and shook her head. "I can't go back like this, not yet." "Then let me build you a fire at least," Lil offered. "It's getting cold, and those clothes need drying." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Lil led her and his horse to a small clearing not far from the river, but sheltered from view by a stand of cottonwoods. With practiced efficiency, he gathered kindling and larger branches, arranging them in a neat pile before striking a match. Soon, a small fire crackled between them. "Thank you," Willow said quietly, extending her hands toward the warmth. Lil busied himself with his saddlebags, pulling out a tin cup and a small pouch of coffee. "It's not much, but it'll warm you up inside," he explained, filling the cup with water from his canteen and setting it near the fire to heat. "You're very kind, Mr. Rawlins. Just Lil, please." He settled across from her, giving her space. "Now, I don't mean to pry, but a lady like yourself shouldn't be out here alone, especially in such distress. Is there someone in town I should fetch for you?" Willow's face crumpled again. "No, there's no one, no family, friends." She shook her head. I arrived in Silver Creek 3 weeks ago. I was to be married to Edgar Thornton. Lil's eyebrows rose. Edgar Thornton owned the largest mercantile in Silver Creek and considerable property besides. He was a well-respected businessman, though Lil had always found him cold and calculating. Was to be, he prompted gently. This morning I discovered he's already married, Willow said, her voice breaking. He has a wife in St. Louis. Someone sent a telegram to the sheriff. Lil exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, Miss Palmer. He lied to me, for months in his letters, about everything. She looked up, anger flashing through her tears. I sold my parents' home in Kansas City after they died. I used everything I had to come here to start a new life with him. And now you've got nowhere to go, Lil surmised. Willow nodded miserably. I'm staying at the boarding house, but my funds will only last another week. After that, she trailed off, staring into the fire. Lil handed her the cup of coffee, now steaming hot. Careful, it's strong, he warned. As she sipped, he contemplated her situation. What skills do you have, Miss Palmer? For employment, I mean. I can read and write well. I kept my father's accounts when he was ill. I can sew, though not well enough for dressmaking. She offered a wan smile. I play the piano passably, but I doubt that's much use out here. You'd be surprised, Lil replied. Silver Creek's growing. Mrs. Holloway at the school might need help. And there's talk of the hotel expanding. They'll need someone who can keep books and correspond with suppliers. Hope flickered briefly in Willow's eyes before dimming again. Who would hire me now? After the scandal with Edgar. Folks here judge a person by their actions, not their misfortunes, Lil said firmly. And you're not the one who did wrong. They fell silent for a while. The crackling fire and distant night sounds the only conversation between them. Lil watched Willow covertly as she stared into the flames. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a quiet dignity about her, a resilience beneath the grief. I should get you back to town, he said finally, noting how the darkness had settled around them. The boarding house will be locking up soon. Willow nodded, rising to her feet. Her skirts had dried somewhat, though they remained stained with river mud. I must look a fright, she murmured, attempting to smooth her hair. You look like someone who's had a hard day, Lil said simply. Nothing wrong with that. He extinguished the fire carefully, then offered her a hand up onto his horse. I'll walk alongside if that's all right with you. As they made their way toward the lights of Silver Creek, Willow spoke again. Why did you stop today? At the river? Lil considered the question. My ma always said you should never turn away from someone in pain, he answered finally. Said it makes the whole world colder when we do. She sounds wise. She was. Lil adjusted his hat. Lost her 10 years ago, influenza. I'm sorry, Willow said softly. Life out here takes as much as it gives, he replied. But we keep going. The boarding house loomed ahead, a 2-story wooden structure with a wrap-around porch. A few lamps still burned in the windows. Lil helped Willow dismount, keeping a respectful distance once her feet touched the ground. Thank you, Mr. Rawlins. Lil, she corrected herself. For the fire and the company. My pleasure, Miss Palmer. He hesitated, then added, if you need anything at all, you send word to the Broken Spoke. Anyone in town can point you there. Willow nodded, a small smile touching her lips for the first time. Good night, then. Good night. Lil watched her climb the steps and enter the building before mounting his horse and turning toward the ranch. Thoughts of the woman with the tear-stained face lingering in his mind long after he'd returned to the bunkhouse. 3 days passed before Lil saw Willow again. He'd come into town for supplies, a list from the cook tucked in his shirt pocket. As he loaded sacks of flour into the wagon, a familiar voice caught his attention. Mr. Rawlins. He turned to find Willow approaching, looking transformed from the bedraggled woman at the river. Her dark hair was neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet, her blue dress simple but well-fitted. Most notably, her eyes were clear and determined, though shadows of exhaustion still lingered beneath them. "Miss Palmer," he greeted her, touching his hat brim. "You're looking well." "Thanks to your kindness the other evening," she replied. "I wanted to thank you properly in the light of day." Lil shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true." She glanced around the busy street. "Do you have a moment?" "I have some news I'd like to share." "Of course." Lil secured the last sack in the wagon and followed her to a bench outside the general store. "I've found employment," Willow announced with quiet pride. "At the Silver Creek Gazette. Mr. Harrison needs someone to set type and manage subscriptions." "That's wonderful news," Lil said, genuinely pleased. "Harrison's a good man, fair employer." "Yes, he seems to be." Willow's hands twisted in her lap. "He knew about what happened with Edgar. Most of the town does, it seems. But he judged me on my penmanship and mathematics, not my poor choice in correspondence." "Just like I said they would," Lil reminded her with a gentle smile. "You were right." She hesitated. "I start tomorrow. The pay isn't much, but it's enough to keep me at the boarding house while I look for more permanent lodgings." "Mrs. Finch over on Elm Street rents rooms in her house," Lil suggested. "Clean place, reasonable rates, and she makes the best apple pie in 3 counties." Willow laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. "I'll keep that in mind." A comfortable silence fell between them. Around them, Silver Creek bustled with midday activity wagons rumbling past, shoppers moving between stores, children darting through the crowds on errands or mischief. "Will you be in town again soon?" Willow asked suddenly. Lil felt a warmth spread through his chest at the question. "I could be. Ranch keeps me busy, but I find my way to town most Saturdays. Perhaps." She looked down, then met his eyes with newfound courage. "Perhaps we might have coffee sometime, at the hotel restaurant, as a proper thank you." "I'd like that," Lil replied, his voice steady despite the quickening of his pulse. "This Saturday," she confirmed, rising from the bench. 1 o'clock, I'll be there." As Willow walked away, Lil watched her progress down the street, noting how she nodded politely to those she passed, her head held high despite the whispers that still followed her. Strong, he thought. Stronger than she knows. Saturday couldn't come quickly enough. Lil found himself volunteering for every errand that might take him to town, hoping for a glimpse of Willow, though their paths didn't cross again before their appointed meeting. When Saturday finally arrived, he bathed with unusual thoroughness, trimmed his beard, and donned his one good shirt kept pristine in his trunk for special occasions. "Were you headed all spruced up?" asked Tom, one of the other hands, as Lil saddled his horse. "Town," Lil replied simply. Tom grinned knowingly. "Must be a lady involved. You smell like you fell into a barrel of bay rum." Lil felt his ears grow hot. "Just meeting a friend." Sure," Tom laughed, slapping him on the back. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." "That leaves plenty of room for mischief," Lil retorted good-naturedly, mounting his horse and heading for Silver Creek. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in town, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows looking out onto the main street. Lil arrived 15 minutes early, nervously adjusting his collar as he waited outside. When Willow appeared, walking briskly from the direction of the newspaper office, he felt that same strange tightness in his chest. "I hope you haven't been waiting long," she said, slightly breathless. "Just got here myself," Lil assured her. Inside, they were seated at a small table near the window. Willow removed her gloves and bonnet, revealing hair styled more elaborately than he'd seen before, with small braids woven into the dark mass. "You look lovely," he said before he could stop himself. Color rose in her cheeks. "Thank you. My landlady helped with my hair. She said it was about time I stopped hiding in my room. Wise woman." They ordered coffee and pie, falling into surprisingly easy conversation. Willow told him about her first days at the newspaper, learning the intricacies of the printing press and the peculiarities of Silver Creek's subscribers. "Mr. Harrison says old Mrs. Whittaker won't renew unless we print her poetry, but it's dreadful," she confided with a laugh. All about her cats and the changing seasons, with rhymes that don't quite work. Lil found himself enchanted by the animation in her face, so different from the despair he'd witnessed at the river. In turn, he told her about life at the Broken Spoke, the camaraderie of the bunkhouse, the challenges of the upcoming cattle drive, the majestic landscape that surrounded them. "I've never been beyond the town limits," Willow admitted. "Except for that evening." "I could show you sometime," Lil offered. "There's a vista not far from the ranch where you can see clear to the mountains. In spring, it's carpeted with wildflowers." "I'd like that," she said softly. They lingered over their coffee until the waitress began giving them pointed looks. Reluctantly, Lil paid the bill, refusing Willow's attempt to do so, and they stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. "May I walk you home?" he asked. "Please." As they strolled through town, Lil was acutely aware of the glances cast their way. Willow seemed to notice too, her spine stiffening slightly. "People will talk," she murmured. "Let them," Lil replied. "We're doing nothing wrong." Willow had indeed taken a room at Mrs. Finch's house, a tidy residence with lace curtains and a small but well-tended garden. At the gate, she turned to face him. "Thank you for today," she said. I can't remember the last time I simply enjoyed someone's company." "Neither can I," Lil admitted. "Could we do it again? Next Saturday, I'd like that very much." Impulsively, Lil took her hand and pressed it briefly. "Until then, Miss Palmer." Until then. Over the weeks that followed, their Saturday meetings became a cherished ritual. Sometimes they ate at the hotel, other times they packed simple picnics and ventured to the outskirts of town. Lil showed her his favorite spots along the river, safely away from where they'd first met, and taught her to skip stones across the water's surface. Willow bloomed under his attention, growing more confident each time they met. She shared stories of her childhood in Kansas City, of her parents' loving but strict household, of her dreams to someday write stories of her own instead of just setting type for others. In turn, Lil opened up about his past, his upbringing on a small farm in Ohio, the drought that drove his family west, the years of drifting before he found a home at the Broken Spoke. "Have you ever wanted more than ranch work?" Willow asked one afternoon as they sat beneath an old oak tree, watching clouds drift across the vast Montana sky. Lil considered the question. "Sometimes I think about having my own place. Nothing grand, just enough land for some cattle, a good horse or two." "A home," Willow said softly. "Yes." He glanced at her, taking in her profile against the golden light. "A home." As summer progressed toward autumn, Lil found himself counting the days between their meetings, thinking of things to tell her, places to show her. The other ranch hands teased him mercilessly about his town girl, but he bore it with good humor. "You're sweet on her, ain't you?" Tom asked one evening as they mended tack in the barn. "I suppose I am," Lil admitted, the first time he'd said it aloud. Tom nodded sagely. "Thought so. You get this look on your face whenever anyone mentions going to town. Like a dog that's heard the dinner bell." Lil threw a rag at him, laughing despite himself. In town, Willow faced her own questioning, though of a different sort. Edgar Thornton had left Silver Creek after his deception was revealed, but his influence remained. Some of the town's more gossipy residents raised eyebrows at her quick attachment to Lil, suggesting she'd come to town hunting for any husband she could find. Mrs. Davenport asked if we had set a date yet, Willow told Lil with exasperation during one of their walks. As if we were engaged. When I said we were just friends, she gave me the most disbelieving look. Lil's heart had skipped at the word friends, though he wasn't sure why. What else would they be? Yet when he looked at Willow, her cheeks flushed with indignation, her eyes bright. He knew friendship didn't begin to encompass what he felt. Let them talk, he said again, though the words felt hollow. As autumn painted the landscape in fiery hues, Lil faced a difficult separation. The cattle drive to Cheyenne would take him away for nearly a month, the longest they would be apart since meeting. "I'll write," he promised the evening before his departure. They stood on Mrs. Finch's porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the garden. "Every day," Willow teased, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Every chance I get," he amended, "though my penmanship might make you reconsider our friendship." "Never," she said softly. Lil reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "I'll miss you, Willow." It was the first time he'd used her given name without the formality of Miss Palmer. The sound of it hung in the air between them, intimate and new. "I'll miss you too, Lil." For a breathless moment he thought about kissing her, wanted to with an intensity that startled him. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "I should go. Early start tomorrow. Be safe," she whispered. The cattle drive was as grueling as expected long days in the saddle, cold nights under the stars, dust and fatigue constant companions. But Lil found moments to write, sending letters whenever they passed through settlements with postal service. He wrote of the trail's challenges and small triumphs, of the camaraderie among the men, of the vast landscapes they traversed. But mostly, he wrote of missing her carefully at first, then with growing honesty as the miles stretched between them. In one letter, penned by campfire after a particularly exhausting day, he confessed, "I find myself looking for you in every town we pass, though I know you're safe in Silver Creek. It seems I've grown accustomed to your smile, your voice, the way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're thinking. The world seems duller without you in it." Willow's replies sustained him through the journey. Her letters arrived irregularly, sometimes several at once when they reached a town. She wrote of changes in Silver Creek, a new family moving in, plans for a harvest festival, her increasing responsibilities at the newspaper. She described autumn's arrival, the changing colors of the trees along the river, the first frost silvering the grass, and increasingly she wrote of missing him. In her fourth letter she admitted, "I walk past the river sometimes where we first met. Is it strange that I'm grateful for that terrible day now? If I hadn't been there, crying like a child, you might never have stopped. We might never have spoken. The thought makes me realize how precious our friendship has become to me. Friendship." The word both warmed and troubled Lil as he reread her letters by lantern light. Was that all she felt? All she wanted? He couldn't be sure, and the uncertainty gnawed at him as the drive continued its slow progress toward Cheyenne. By the time they reached their destination, sold the cattle, and began the journey home, Lil had made a decision. He would speak plainly to Willow about his feelings, whatever the consequences. The thought terrified him almost as much as it exhilarated him. The return journey seemed interminable. When the familiar outline of the Broken Spoke Ranch finally appeared on the horizon, Lil felt a surge of anticipation so strong it nearly made him dizzy. After the necessary tasks were completed, horses tended to, gear stowed, report given to the foreman, he requested permission to ride into town. "Figured you'd be asking," the foreman said with a knowing smile. "Go on then, but I expect you back by noon tomorrow. We've got work to do." Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Lil was already heading for the stable before the words were fully out of his mouth. The ride to Silver Creek had never seemed longer. When he finally arrived, the town was quiet in the late afternoon light. Lil made straight for the newspaper office, his heart pounding. Through the window, he could see Willow bent over the printing press, her brow furrowed in concentration as she arranged type. For a moment, he simply watched her, drinking in the sight like a man too long in the desert. Then he dismounted, tied his horse, and pushed open the door. The bell above jingled and Willow looked up. For a heartbeat, she simply stared as if not quite believing what she saw. Then her face transformed with joy. "Lil," she exclaimed, hurrying from behind the counter. "You're back. I didn't expect you until next week." "The drive went faster than expected," he explained, suddenly tongue-tied in her presence. "Good weather, no troubles." They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite knowing what to do. Then, to Lil's surprise, Willow stepped forward and embraced him briefly. "I'm so glad you're safe," she murmured against his shoulder. The touch of her, the scent of ink and lavender that surrounded her, nearly undid him completely. When she stepped back, her cheeks pink, he had to resist the urge to pull her close again. "Are you finished here?" he asked, gesturing to the press. "Could we walk somewhere? Talk? Let me just tell Mr. Harrison I'm leaving." Willow disappeared into the back room, returning moments later with her bonnet and shawl. "Where shall we go?" "The river," Lil suggested. "Where we first met," Willow's eyes softened. "Yes, I'd like that." They walked in companionable silence, occasionally brushing hands, exchanging shy glances. The river gleamed in the late afternoon sun, the water lower than it had been in summer but flowing steadily. "It looks different now," Willow observed as they reached the spot where Lil had found her crying all those months ago. "Peaceful." "Much like you," Lil said gently. She smiled up at him. "I suppose I have changed. For the better, I hope. Very much so." Willow turned to face the water, her profile gilded by the sun. "I came to Silver Creek thinking my life was over, that I'd made a mistake I couldn't recover from. But now," Lil prompted when she trailed off. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his directly. "Being with anyone else," Lil's breath caught. "Willow, I know it's forward of me," she interrupted, words tumbling out in a rush. "A lady shouldn't speak so plainly. But these weeks without you, reading your letters, I realized I couldn't bear it if you didn't know how I feel." Hope surged in Lil's chest. "And how is that?" "I love you," she said simply. "I think I have since that night by the fire when you promised I wouldn't weep alone again." For a moment, Lil couldn't speak, overcome by the joy coursing through him. Then he stepped forward, taking both her hands in his. "I love you too, Willow Palmer," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Have for months now. Every day away from you was torture." Her eyes shimmered with tears, happy ones this time. "Really, really," he confirmed, raising one hand to gently cup her cheek. "May I kiss you?" Her answer was to rise on tiptoe, bringing her lips to his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened, months of longing and restraint melting away in the warmth of their embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lil rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day I left," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" she asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Wasn't sure you felt the same, didn't want to presume." Willow laughed softly. "Always the gentleman." "Not always," he murmured, kissing her again. "Not when it comes to how much I want you in my life." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the river, they sat together on the bank, planning a future neither had dared imagine months before. Lil spoke of his savings, nearly enough for a small parcel of land not far from town. Willow shared her hope to continue working at the newspaper, perhaps eventually writing her own column. "We could build a house," Lil said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the water flow. "Nothing fancy at first. Add to it as we go. With a garden," Willow added dreamily. "And bookshelves built into the walls. And a wide porch for summer evenings. And children someday?" Willow asked, a hint of shyness returning to her voice. Lil pressed a kiss to her temple. "Nothing would make me happier." As darkness fell, they walked back to town hand in hand, no longer caring who might see or what they might say. At Mrs. Finch's gate, Lil knelt suddenly, taking Willow's hand. "I don't have a ring yet," he said, looking up at her surprised face. "But I'll get one. Willow Palmer, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner, the mother of our children." Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Lil. Yes to all of it." He rose and kissed her again, sealing their promise under the first stars of evening. 2 months later, on a crisp December morning, they were married in Silver Creek's small church. The town turned out in force, their initial gossip having transformed into genuine affection for the couple whose courtship they had witnessed. Even Mrs. Davenport dabbed at her eyes during the ceremony. Lil had purchased 10 acres of land with a small cabin, just a mile from town, close enough for Willow to continue her work at the newspaper, far enough to give them the privacy and peace they both cherished. They moved in the day after their wedding, the cabin sparse but warm, filled with potential and promises. That evening, as they sat before the fireplace in their new home, Willow nestled against Lil's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Completely," she sighed contentedly. "Do you ever think about that day, at the river?" "Often," Lil admitted. "Sometimes I think about how easily we might have missed each other, if I'd watered my horse elsewhere, if you'd gone home earlier. If I hadn't been crying my eyes out over a man who wasn't worth a single tear," Willow added wryly. Lil tightened his embrace. "I meant what I said that day, you know. You'll never weep alone again, not while I'm breathing." Willow turned in his arms, raising her face for a kiss. "I know," she whispered against his lips, "and that's why I'll never need to." Outside, snow began to fall gently, covering their small piece of Montana in a blanket of white. Inside, the fire crackled and popped, casting golden light over the man and woman who had found in each other the home they'd both been seeking, a sanctuary built not of wood and nails, but of trust, compassion, and love that had begun with a chance encounter by a river's edge.